Hey everyone, back on the channel and excited for today's installment. Uh, Today we're going to be talking about. I wanted this topic to be. It's kind of political, but it's almost not even political. It's like a. It's more ideological, and examining maybe some of the motives of like victim mindedness and what that has turned into historically. So I'm titling this one America's intellectual dekulakization. Um, I guess it could also be like America's ideological dekulakization. Um, so, yeah, we're going to get into some pretty interesting stuff here. And I don't know how long this video is going to be, but this is a topic that we could definitely talk for hours because I don't actually have uh, a ton of background in the history of like the Soviet Union. I'm actually reading the Gulag Archipelago now, which I've just started, and I'm reading other things as well. Um, so I haven't got dug into the Gulag Archipelago too much, but so far what I've read is incredible. I mean, it's an incredible book. It won the Nobel or Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I can never pronounce his name. Won the Nobel Prize for that book because he exposed what happened in the Soviet Union um, during the uh, during the hunt for anybody who disagreed with the party in power. And there was a ton of other stuff going on. It was just pure evil. You could really when you if you have a biblical worldview and an understanding of evil being present, you can just see like how um, when God was pulled out of that culture, the devil was able to move in and just essentially destroy the humanity of an entire country and um, and rip people from any sort of moral grounding that they were able to have. So, anyways, but I'm not going to really talk about that. I want to talk more about today, what is happening in our day and age, and because we don't have people coming in with jackboots and taking people out of their homes and putting them in prison into concentration camps. We might not ever have that, but a lot of my videos do touch on Marxism, and and I think people might sometimes watch that, and the more I say those things, they might get sick and tired of hearing about Marxism, 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 because they don't actually. It's not really something that's on their radar as a threat. Um, and interestingly, a lot of those people do view Christianity as a threat, as a objective threat to humanity and to society. But they don't necessarily see like they see, people who are Christians and who are political like me. Even though I'm not like I don't put all my eggs in that basket, but they see us as kind of like a threat because we what they think is that we're going to try to put them under a theocracy. But in my upcoming book, Big American Problems, I don't want to get into all this, but in my upcoming book, I explain why that's a fallacy, and I explain why um, that's just not true. And why it is dangerous to bigotedly force Christians into a corner and marginalize them, and not dangerous as in we're going to retaliate and come attack people, but that's not a good sign for where a society is headed historically. Um, Anyways, so the American intellectual dekulakization. If we look at the kulaks, I touched a little bit on this in my last installment, the um, postmodern Babel. The intellectual dekulakization is taking place in America today. Um, People are being not divided in a sort of physical or geographical segregation, because basically that can't happen now, or people will catch on to it being wrong. But this ties in with everything that I was talking about with tyranny and the way that it moves in to take a society up by incremental steps, um, in order to socially condition a population and keep them kind of in the dark as to the real motivations of the. I like to call it the state, and I'm not saying like it's Joe Biden or it's Kamala Harris or it's Anthony Fauci, because like really it's a bigger entity. I don't even like to say it's, you know, the the Democrats or the liberals or the left or the right or conservatives or Donald Trump. Like it's a bigger entity. You know, obviously I'm a conservative, so I'm gonna see the larger threat coming from the people who are actually actively trying to silence our freedom of speech and take away our ability to voice our opinions. So let me give an example of that. With my videos, I've been posting them on my Facebook for about a week now. I've only had this channel for a couple weeks, and um, I'm fortunate and blessed to have enough time. God has really blessed me with time, and I think He wants me to teach people things through these videos. But I put my videos up on Facebook, and they're I if I had to guess, I would say Facebook's limiting my reach, because I posted things about Facebook misinformation, or Facebook flagging people for misinformation, Facebook limiting people's reach. I posted things about the COVID-19, not like misinformation, but just things that that challenge the narrative, right? And so they have m- basically, this is what's kind of creepy about this, is that I think that they are limiting my reach, but I don't know for sure, because basically I signed on to somebody else who has allowed me access to their Facebook, and I posted all this stuff, like 12 different videos that I did on this YouTube channel onto the Facebook feed kind of all at once. So it just like bam, 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 bam. So I logged onto this person's Facebook and went and checked the feed to see. It's actually my mom's Facebook, but she lets me on, and I wasn't gonna go like say stuff on her Facebook, but I just wanted to see like if my videos were coming up um, in the feed, and they did. So I went on like right away, and they did, and then I clicked refresh, and then nothing came up, and I scrolled down the feed for probably like an hour. So there were like a couple that showed up, um, but then like when I clicked refresh and scrolled down, like for an hour, it was showing everybody's posts but mine. And this is my own mother, so you'd think like Facebook would show her my post because they would understand that she's interested in seeing my posts. But anyways, like that's kind of another example of gaslighting, because like there's no way for me to prove that that is happening, and like some people would even like hear me saying that and be like, "You're crazy. You're crazy to think that they're targeting you." But I'm not crazy, because I read or well, I know I'm not crazy, but but it's not absurd to think that, because I've read multiple articles that have claimed that that's what they're going to start doing, not just with like the really popular people, but with everyday users. So there's a Bloomberg article. I can't remember the name of the other article. So and both of these articles, by the way, were in support of this. So they were, I did a whole video. One of my videos was kind of proving this, so I'm not going to prove that here. Um, so anyways, like that's kind of a part of like the intellectual dekulakization, because they're not allowing you to get any information that they're not sanctioning. They're not allowing you to get any. outside opinions, any other viewpoints than the ones that are popular. So that's a scary thing, guys. But anyways, I wanted to but and you know, there are people who think that that's not even a problem on their radar. And they actually get upset, like so I posted a video about this on my Instagram with the Facebook monitoring free speech and cracking down on free speech. And it was just a video about that, and I lost like 5 followers, you know, because people really don't like hearing anything that other people have to say right now that doesn't isn't sanctioned by the media, isn't sanctioned by the big tech platforms. So people, because people think that we, anybody, and I'm not saying Republicans or GOP or conservatives, I'm saying like anybody who thinks any differently than they do, people think that they're spreading misinformation. Um, so now, and so that's what the tech gods, I like to call them, have labeled anything they disagree with as misinformation, right? So they said misinformation or hate speech or flagging this or that, and all of those things. That's a problem because those things are so vague. They can literally be anything you want them to be at any time. Um, Hate speech can be sharing the gospel. Um, Hate speech can be calling man a man and a woman a woman. It can be literally anything that they disagree with at the time or that threatens the political establishment. Um, so these are scary times that we're living in, and these are exactly the times that the founding fathers and the documents that founded our nation, like the highest law of our nation, which command us to speak out when our rights are coming under threat. These are exactly the times that they saw in the future that were scary. And this isn't the only time this has ever happened too. Under the Woodrow Wilson's administration, and I think FDR's administration as well, both Democrat presidents and their administrations would limit and censor anything. I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was FDR, but I could be wrong. They would limit people from sharing or speaking out against the administration, and they would actually threaten people with fines or jail time for um, criticizing their administration. So I can't, like I said, I can't remember which one it was, but so that was a fascistic thing. So and both of those presidents are still kind of lionized in our day and age, but people don't realize like that was one of the closest times, other than right now, that we came to actual government instituted fascism. And at that time, fascism wasn't. It didn't have the social. It wasn't a social taboo, and it wasn't seen as something uh, dangerous to society. Then it was actually seen as something positive because it was unifying everybody, and so now you hear, you know, the left saying unify, unity, 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 and crying out for unity. But what they really mean is forced compliance and obedience to their narrative. And so they don't really mean like where everybody accepts everybody's different outlooks and opinions. They really mean like where the only information that you're allowed to get and the only thoughts that you're allowed to think are the thoughts that they tell you to think. And they've done that. They've succeeded in tricking the population into believing that as well by politicizing everything. And so now what happens if you, because if somebody on the left is watching this video right now and they're getting mad at the things I'm saying, they're going to claim that I'm being political, that I'm just being too political. Um, and when I'm actually telling the truth about what's going on in the world today and the threat that we're under as Americans, that I'm just being political. But I'm talking about things that are affecting everybody, and so that's always something that they can go to, like, you're being political, you're being this, you're being that, and that's one of the tactics that they use. And they also use this word gaslighting, which is actually what the leftist media is doing. It's gaslighting people who think differently than they do into believing that they're actually crazy. So, and that's what gaslighting is. It's telling a lie and then telling the person who you're telling the lie to that they're actually telling the lie, something like that, right? And then so they probably on the left throw out the word gaslighting a lot more than we do on the right, because we don't want to always jump to conclusions that people are like intentionally gaslighting us. But I do think like the media and the Biden administration are intentionally gaslighting us, and I think that at least they know in part what they're doing, um, and and so, but I don't think that lots of people who are gaslighting people are intentionally gaslighting them. Like I think a lot of them have been led to believe uh, the things that they believe, and they have been integrated into this system of intellectual dekulakization through media manipulation, through social conditioning, um, and some of the things that includes is the hatred of Christianity, hatred of the church, as we saw in another video of mine, church burning in Canada, and people wanting to bring it here under the guise of social justice for the Indigenous people in Canada. And so they want to bring that here. So hatred of Christianity, hatred of religion, that's one thing. And that's also what we see in China, where people are heavily persecuted. Christians are persecuted. The Falun Gong are persecuted in China because they think thoughts and they have a God that's higher than the state. They have beliefs that the state can't touch, right? And so that as Christians, that's why we are a major danger, and we are one of the first people on the list of people to dekulak, is because we have a God who is sovereign over the state, because we actually don't believe that Joe Biden has any power of his own. We believe that God gave him the power. And even if the state was to outlaw and suppress our freedom of speech, we would still be commanded by the God to preach the gospel. And that's one of the reasons why I think like right now they're yelling GOP, GOP, GOP. But in the end, they're gonna really catch on, and this is scary for Christians. But they're gonna catch on that the real enemy of the dekulakization is Christianity and the God they worship. So, so that's when you start thinking about like, because they already believe the Bible is a misinformation. They already believe the Bible is a book of fairy tales. So it's not a far stretch of imagination to think that they could say, well, hey, the Bible is not just a book of fairy tales; it's also a book of dangerous fairy tales that cause Christians uh, to disagree with us, and so we need to ban the Bible. We need to ban Christians' ability to spread this misinformation of Christianity. Um, so you can see how vague misinformation is, that word misinformation, how vague that word, so you have misinformation. And hate speech can kind of be applied to like anything that people can disagree with at any time. And as Christians, that those should, and as Americans, like, but especially as Christians right now with this kind of rising tide against Christianity and against the church, we should be concerned about this like campaign against misinformation, because as we've seen, it's already spread beyond its what it was intended for initially. They did the misinformation thing, wanting to get rid of misinformation concerning COVID and concerning the election results. Um, and now it's spread to anything the Democratic Party disagrees with, or anything that the left disagrees with, or anything that the LGBTQ community disagrees with, anything that the pro-choice industry disagrees with, and so it's just kind of spreading throughout all those things, and so as Christians that should concern us because we never know if they can, because they're going to keep pushing, and what they're going to do next is likely come for our freedom of speech as Christians and freedom in preaching the gospel. But as Christians, we should also remember, like, they're never going to get us to stop doing that, even if they deplatform us, because we still have our voices. Um, and then that's what happened in Soviet Russia. They would start imprisoning people. Anyways, I'm kind of getting off track here, but uh, the intellectual. I wanted to kind of talk about like the presuppositions that contribute to the intellectual dekulakization of America, and one of them is the gaslighting of people who are being restricted to share their opinions and their ideas on social media platforms, as well as the gaslighting tactics that they're using. And this is real gaslighting, not the gaslighting that the left is claiming is happening to them. This is real gaslighting because only people with a certain political viewpoint, only people with a certain religious viewpoint are being prohibited from sharing their thoughts and opinions on Facebook, like me, likely, and many others. Um, and they've recognized that they can't go all out on that yet, because once they do, then they're going to face an uprising, right? And so that's one of the strategies of the dekulakization, and another strategy is the social conditioning aspect that they use on our friends and families and neighbors. People who like are hooked on NPR all day or hooked on CNN all day. Because like I'm not hooked on the news all day. Like I don't particularly I don't watch CNN. I watched CNN a little bit yesterday, for the first time in a long time, because I was like, I wonder what they're saying, and I remembered why I didn't watch it. Because they hate me and they hate everything I stand for. But it's kind of weird to think like people who I know and love very much, and I would love them even if they became my enemies, are watching that material all day, every day. From when they wake up, they turn on NPR, and then when they go to bed, they watch CNN, and then throughout the afternoon, they read New York Times. And those I've seen aspects of how all those media outlets are conditioning people to think of their neighbors who disagree with them as the kulaks, as the oppressors, and to think of themselves as the righteous ones, right? And the people on the side of the angels, and the people who disagree with them as demons. And so this kind of tactic has been used in other authoritarian and totalitarian regimes, like in Nazi Germany. They had which was an actual propaganda campaign. Um, so basically, like CNN and New York Times, they say that they would say like everything that I'm talking about right now is just political propaganda, right? Um, but meanwhile, they're also regurgitating their own propaganda, and so what that is doing is gaslighting me, because um, this is just like I'm just being who I am, and I'm just expressing my outlook and opinion. And what they can do is they can politicize everything and say that you're just spreading propaganda. But really, CNN is actually spreading propaganda. And I'm not spreading propaganda because I am led by the Holy Spirit to do these videos. And I understand that I am not hiding anything. I'm actually trying to shine a light on things and tell the truth. Whereas CNN intentionally hides things. They did a video, uh, because if I was intentionally hiding things, then that would be propaganda. Like if I was intentionally like telling certain information while leaving out other information, knowing that it would cause somebody to believe my version of the story, which I'm not doing. Like when I did my Planned Parenthood video, I wasn't leaving out anything. I was trying to share everything that I included, and I couldn't think of anything positive about Planned Parenthood. I really couldn't think of one thing positive that they've ever said or done. Um, People might say that it's positive that they hand out birth control to eighth graders, but again, I disagree. I don't think that's a good thing. Um, so CNN did do that. They do intentionally filter information, and they intentionally leave things out because now the left is pushing to reinstate mask mandates, not just for unvaccinated people but for vaccinated people as well, and to force children in schools to wear masks all this next year. So children for 8-10 hours a day will be forced to wear masks all the time. And CNN really wants this to happen, and people on the left really want this to happen. I watched a video of CNN talking about this, and they were confronting a woman and her lawyer who have filed a lawsuit in their county against masks. And so CNN makes them out to look like idiots, right? And makes them out to look like the bad guys, the wicked, gaslighting GOP who doesn't understand public health concerns and safety. So basically, this COVID mindset has led to a never-ending power grab with the left. That the left themselves, like leftist people, don't actually consider it to be a power grab. They think that anybody who calls it a power grab is a conspiracy theorist. I've actually, and I'm saying this from experience because I've actually been labeled a conspiracy theorist by somebody who disagreed that there was anything fishy about the COVID narrative. So basically, what they did was they're pointing to, I think it was Florida. Oh yeah, so they had a thing with Governor DeSantis too. In Florida, there's a rise in cases, but there's not a rise in deaths. So and the same thing was with this county. There was a rise in cases, but there wasn't a rise in deaths. In fact, the death rate was still really low in both of these places. But CNN intentionally hid the death rate, which you can just Google. But they know most of their people are not going to Google the death rate because most of their people want this to happen. They want the government to have more control. They are putting their trust in the state as being God, and that was something that was happening in the Dekulakization and in Stalin's Russia, where people would even turn over their friends and family to the state because they revered the state and they believed that the state was the highest moral authority and the highest intellectual authority. So basically, what that ends up doing is, like, if you believe anything that's not sanctioned by the state, that's not sanctioned, and when I mean the state, I mean all of this ideology that's conforming into the same pattern that's contributing to the politicization of everything. If you deviate from their ideology in one iota, you are considered marked, right? And you are not allowed to believe anything that is not sanctioned by the state, which is the highest intellectual authority as well as the highest moral authority. So you see that with the LGBTQ belief system, with the COVID belief system, with the social justice belief system, and with the, what else? eco-critical, environmental belief system, and all of those things are, and others are all working together. Also, the pro-choice belief system, and those things are all there. I'm not saying they're all the same, and they're all like there's somebody at the top who's like feeding this to people, but these things are all contributing to one another, and they're all interlinking. Um, and as Christians, we can understand how that can happen. As Christians, we can make a sense of why that is, but that's why, as not for a non-Christian, to say that those things have any there's any sort of motivation behind them or any sort of spiritual agenda going on behind them is sounds crazy because there's no overarching meaning. There's no enemy of our hearts who's working against us. Uh, there's no God, right? So in that universe, there's chaos, right? And chaos and randomness is all we have. And so anybody who is trying to connect the dots does become, in effect, a conspiracy theorist because they're able to recognize that there is more meaning going on behind these things. So, anyways, this is the intellectual dekulakization that's happening in America right now, and it's turning next door neighbors into um, rabid racists, and it's turning like people who are catching on to like a lot of the people don't even my friends and family don't even know like where I stand on this stuff. Um, and a lot of times, like I have to walk on eggshells around people because if I really express who I am and really talk about my beliefs, I will be persecuted, right? And I think that's something as Christians we need to recognize as well is that one of the reasons we're not being persecuted yet is because we're not fully expressing our beliefs, and I'm preaching to myself here, right? Because we know that there is a little bit of fear of man going on in our hearts, and we are dismayed by people's criticisms and their looks. But the Bible says, "Don't be dismayed by their looks," right? Don't be worried about what they say because ultimately they have a different understanding. In Scripture, Paul says they are darkened in their understanding, and their foolish hearts have become darkened because they have basically turned away from God and pulled God out of everything. And so we can see how like pulling God out of everything would result in the chaos of a nation, or what seems like chaos to the world. But to excuse me, but to Christians, we understand that it falls into the same pattern of history, the same pattern of things in the world. Which, if you don't believe me, go watch my video, the postmodern Babel. That shows that there are patterns, and Jesus and Isaiah and Solomon and all the prophets recognized patterns. They recognized danger in rejecting God, and so as Christians, like if we don't see those patterns, and if we don't understand danger and stand up for what is right, then we are essentially also becoming desensitized and also being socially conditioned as well. So there's a lot of Christians out there that are falling victim to the social conditioning as well, because maybe they're not reading their scriptures, maybe they're not praying, maybe they're not doing their own research, and so that's resulting in like what is the equivalent of like integrating ideology into our theology in order to make it more palatable to the world around us, and in order to make Christianity kind of camouflage with the culture. Because if we don't do that as Christians, um, Christianity is rejected by the culture, and we are dekulakized because we're. So that's one other thing that I wanted to talk about was the victim mindedness that contributes to the intellectual dekulakization, because basically one of the things that has been employed over the last couple of decades is the idea of being a victim, and that's one of the things that Karl Marx was able to put into his I want to say theology, but it is kind of a theology, put into his theories was the sense of the proletariat being victimized by the bourgeois. And so when that was instated, I mean, it was really complicated what happened in Russia, and all the different power plays and all the different sects of Marxism. But basically, in a nutshell, what happened was people believed themselves to be victimized, and they started seeing their neighbors um, as the oppressors, especially if their neighbors had more money than them. So that's the thing about the bourgeois and the proletariat. They're such just like misinformation. They're vague terms that you can kind of pin on anybody at any time. So like let's say I make $50,000 a year, and the guy who lives next to me makes $75,000 a year. Um, I could potentially like see him as an oppressor. I'm talking about this more with the Russian the dekulakization in Russia, and then point to him because now it's legal. Now actually we're commanded by Russia to, the Russians were telling people to uh, to expose who these people were, and then so they would, if they were a business owner, sometimes they would be surrounded by a mob and told that their business would be burned down. They would be thrown in prison in the gulags. They would be sent to Siberia where they had nowhere to live, nothing to eat, and then they would start eating each other, right? So, but then it got so out of control that nobody knew who the kulaks were and who they weren't, because literally everybody. That's the thing about victim mindedness. Everybody can claim the status of a victim at any point in given time, and therefore claim the status of somebody else as an oppressor at any given time, and those terms of victim and oppressor become so interchangeable and arbitrary that it just becomes meaningless, and that's what contributed to the chaos in the dekulakization, and I would argue in Nazi Germany too. They found so many different enemies that they could send to concentration camps, that they could sterilize, euthanize, because they wanted the master race, right? The Aryan race. So today, people want, and I think that people often on the left really do believe, like, that they are fighting for what's right and what's true and what's good, and they believe that they are fighting against an oppressor, an invisible oppressor, who is basically me, right? Because I'm a Christian, conservative, white male who is not being silent. And so, in that way, I'm a threat because I express conservative ideals. I hate Marxism. I disagree with the LGBTQ platform. I loathe the abortion industry. I see the Democratic Party as tyrannical and authoritarians. I am witnessing people that I know and love resent me for my beliefs, for my Christianity. And and oftentimes I am gaslighted, right? And there's no there's not really like a major high point for me. Like there's not really a yay me, I get to pat myself on the back, a point of virtuosity for saying like abortion is evil, right? Because I know that when I talk about that, I'm gonna get slandered and mocked and derided and hated and all those things. It's not like I get to go, yay me, and pat myself on the back. But if I was to post a rainbow or a black square on my Facebook, or if I was to post you know, an environment, a pro-choice something or an environmental article on environmentalism, then I'm praised and I'm uplifted and I get 150 likes. But because I'm in a sense an activist, right? I don't see myself as an activist. I just see myself as somebody who says things. But because I'm like an activist that's actively fighting for something that I believe in that goes against the common narrative, against um, the modern sense of victim mindedness, I am seen as the oppressor. I am seen as somebody who is attacking the common good and somebody who's threatening the new utopia. And so my neighbors, therefore, can, like I said, a lot of them don't know everything I believe because sometimes I walk on eggshells, sometimes I have the fear of man coming into me. Um, but those who have started like seeing my beliefs come out have, not said like I have lost friends straight up, but they're not. A lot of them aren't saying you're this and you're that, but a lot of them will go behind my back and talk to people about me and ask people if I'm going crazy, if I'm you know if I'm alright, if I'm on drugs, um, which I was on drugs. Now I'm not. Now I'm clean and sober. But you see what I mean. When you start going, like, you start seeing somebody who posts things that disagree with your politics, and then you go, instead of like calling them and saying, "Hey, what's up? I just wanted to chat about this and see like where you stand on this. Like, that's interesting that you're posting this. Um, let's have a conversation." Instead of that, they'll go to somebody on the outside and they'll start saying like, "Is Sam crazy? Or is this Christian crazy?" And they don't even see that that's backbiting and slander, right? They don't even recognize that that's and Christians do it too, right? I've actually had a friend tell me about a brother who came up to him and started asking if I was crazy, because I was posting about the riots, because I was posting about the Democrats lying in the media to us, and I was considered to be crazy. And I don't do that. See um, I don't see that somebody's supporting child slaughter and then call up their best friend and say, "Hey, what's going on with her? She's supporting the abortion industry. Is she crazy?" So, anyways, um, this is dangerous because once you see it start moving from into ideology, then you see it move into other things and start to get out of control. But right now I'm almost at 45 minutes, but I think you can get the idea, that we as Christians, we should be aware that we're high up on that target list of kulaks, of oppressors, even though we're not oppressing anyone. Our Bible, the Scripture commands us to love our enemies, to bless when we are cursed. But because we have a God that's higher than the state, we are seen as tyrants and oppressors, and we're seen as we're seen as being the things that the people who are telling us that we are those things, they actually are. They are actually acting in an authoritarian manner when they see that nobody else has any business believing anything that they don't believe. So that's a problem, and Christians should not have any part in it. I'm not saying a Christian should join the Republican Party. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like we should be keen and aware and discerning in these times, and recognize that like Marxism is a driving force behind a lot of these ideologies. It is the driving force between advanced gender theory. critical race theory, and eco-critical theory, which are driving all those movements and which are the engine for the democratic platform right now. So when people say you're a conspiracy theorist because you think communism is a threat, I would say no, I'm not, because communism is a threat, because Marxism is the driving force. Anyways, I'm at 45 minutes, but I hope this video was a blessing to somebody out there, and thank you for listening. Bye.